True enough, in the midst of all that wind and rain, Tsunade could see in the distance a long line of people advancing along the main road. She was currently standing under one of the large gazebos that had been installed throughout the village, safe points to stay out of the rain thanks to simple seals placed on the ground that prevented wind or rain from passing. Now, if only Jiraiya were able to create something even more useful against that perennial storm, it wouldn't hurt. The idea of a seal that could chase away those clouds was very tempting but almost impossible to create. Tsunade knew that Jiraiya was the best regarding seals in the village, and if he couldn't, it was virtually impossible for anyone else to make it, in the village at least. Tsunade put certain thoughts aside as the group of people from the Empire was getting closer, and she didn't want to look bad. Turning to the 4 ANBU of her personal team, she looked at them with stern eyes. Is everything ready? I don't want nasty surprises. The road to the Namake's mansion has been brought under control, Hokage-sama, said an ANBU with long purple hair. Teams of ANBU and Jonin are currently stationed along the way to avoid problems. Good, I want this situation to be resolved as soon as possible. An ANBU with a boar mask looked at Tsunade for a moment. Permission to speak freely, Hokage-sama? Granted. Why is Naraimine, the Emperor, doing all of this? According to the reports, among his ranks there are warriors and monsters of the highest level, including Itachi Uchiha. He could just have sent someone here and recovered his legacy without anyone noticing, said the ANBU, and the others had to admit that it was a good question. Because he can, replied Tsunade after a long sigh. He is the Emperor, and yet he never did anything to get in touch with us. We are of no use to him while we need him, and he probably knew that eventually we would go and ask for his help. I wouldn't be surprised if he has already foreseen everything up to Sasuke's attempted assassination, and now he can come here, as if the village belonged to him, and he would be perfectly on the side of reason. Even the daimyo would not dare to oppose him once he knew the truth. The 4 ANBU could not help but accept that reasoning. Their daimyo was far from reliable or suited to his task, but even someone like him knew it would be foolish to openly oppose the Empire. Especially when Naruto could count on the power of the Kyuubi, and who knows how many warriors with superhuman abilities. Now get ready, they are coming, said Tsunade, as the convoy was now a few tens of meters from the castle. From what Tsunade could see, there were about 100 people, the bulk of which were divided into 5 columns. The outermost ones were composed of 25 knights, protected by thick armor as well as their steeds. Then there were 2 other columns made up of 25 foot soldiers, armed with spears and shields, with bronze-colored armor. Finally, there was a single column of what Tsunade could think were ninjas, given their all-black attire and with only their eyes visible. However, it was the small group leading the march that caught the Hokage's attention the most. There were 7 people, each one different from the other, starting with what looked like a little boy or kid who was advancing while lying on what looked like a large flying cushion. At her side was a young girl with brown hair tied back in 2 twin tails who had a large war hammer leaning against her shoulder and was chatting with a blonde, green-eyed boy, much shorter than her, who seemed to have a sword sheathed on his back. Then there was a man with short silver hair dressed in red leather clothes and visible studs on both his jacket and trousers. In front of him there was a young dark-haired woman, and Tsunade couldn't tell if she was currently undressed or dressed, as most of her skin was on display, and so was the green-haired woman beside her, who wore a simple bikini with a coat that did nothing to hide her ample curves. Please, don't tell me Naruto became a pervert and ordered women to dress outrageously, thought Tsunade, having a sudden desire to punch Jiraiya. Focusing on the one leading all the others, she couldn't help but shiver. He was a young man with short white hair, dressed in black with a sheathed katana clutched in his left hand, and his blue eyes seemed to see right through her. Finally, the large group of people stopped just 2 meters from Tsunade, who bowed her head in greeting, after noticing a rather strange detail. None of them were wet despite the constant downpour with which they had arrived, and, now that she looked better, it wasn't raining around them. Greetings, I'm Tsunade Senju, the Godame Hokage. I take it you are the ambassadors sent by the Emperor. That is correct, said the swordsman leading the others, looking at her with those cold eyes before briefly observing the village behind her. I am Virgil, son of Sparta, commander of the 10 Commandments, Emperor Naruto's personal guard, and current acting leader of this delegation. The woman with green hair tilted her head while looking at Tsunade with bored eyes. Brandish Miu, member of the Spriggan 12, the personal guard of the second Empress Minerva. Sup. I'm Meliodas, leader of the 7 deadly sins and second seat of the 10 Commandments. Name's Ban. I'm also a member of the 7 deadly sins. Do you happen to have some good alcohol here? The girl with the hammer waved at them. Hello, I'm Diane of the 7 deadly sins. King, same group as them, said the young kid while still laying on his pillow. The last to introduce herself was the dark-haired woman, who seemed amused by something. Merlin, member of the 7 deadly sins like the others. A pleasure, said Tsunade, while her mind was working as fast as it could to catalog all the information it had just received. The day after Jiraiya and the others returned from the Empire, Tsunade had summoned them for a more detailed report and had therefore known that at least 2 of the empresses had a personal guard. But it was by now obvious that both Naruto and his 4 wives had elite guards ready to defend them. Currently, she knew the names of 4 personal guards. Only the group defending the 4th Empress was still unknown, yet these 7 deadly sins had not introduced themselves as part of her personal guard. What exactly are the 7 deadly sins, if you don't mind me asking? We are simply a group made up of members of different races. We have fought alongside the Emperor practically since he set foot on his first battlefield, explained Merlin with a smile still on her face. Tsunade looked at Virgil and Brandish for a moment. There are only 5 of you here. The others are busy with something else. I see. Gesturing toward the village, Tsunade motioned them to follow her. This way, please. I'll guide you toward the Namake's mansion. But after a few steps she stopped, realizing that it was no longer raining around her and that the temperature was more than pleasant. It was still spring despite the perennial rain. I imagine it can be annoying walking in the rain, said Merlin, walking at her side. Take it as a small favor for not openly opposing Naruto when he was still a ninja in your village. Tsunade didn't know what to answer, as she was still amazed at how that woman, since it was obviously her doing, was able to create a dry area without any apparent effort. Walking back along the streets of the village, with several Anbu by their side and on the roofs of the houses, Tsunade immediately noticed how many of the villagers were observing the Empire's emissaries with hatred and envy. Some from the windows of their homes and some on the street. There were even some shinobi among them, and this did nothing but worry Tsunade, who was more and more convinced that something was about to happen. The further into the village they went, the more people seemed to flock along the road, forming small crowds, and as he feared, the situation had further aggravated their mentality, and the breaking point came when someone yelled, "Demon lovers! Begone from Konoha," and a small rock hit Ban right on the forehead, opening a wound from which a little blood came out. Tsunade stopped instantly, turning like everyone towards the source of the voice, only to find a barely 10-year-old boy with his arm still outstretched after throwing the stone. And while the other villagers were looking at him with looks somewhere between admiration and surprise, Virgil and the others were staring at him impassively. Ban ran a hand across his forehead to remove the blood, showing his forehead free from any kind of wound, before reaching down and picking up the stone that had hit him. Looking then in the direction of the child, he could only show a toothy smile. "You dropped this." The next instant, a large hole opened in the wall behind the boy, as well as the walls behind the first. Tsunade could only widen her eyes in her shock as she could barely see the movement of Ban's arm as he was about to throw the stone. In everyone else's eyes, the stone had simply disappeared from Ban's hand, and after glancing behind him, the kid couldn't hold his bladder before falling to the ground with terrified eyes on Ban and the others. "The villagers know how to show respect, I see," said Virgil with a voice so cold that Tsunade thought for a moment he was a member of the Yuki clan. "I am extremely sorry for what happened. Please forgive him." "He's just a child," said the Hokage while bowing her head. Ban merely waved one hand. It's fine, that didn't hurt at all." Mentally cursing the stupidity of that child and of his parents, Tsunade resumed leading the emissaries of the Empire for a few minutes before arriving in front of the Namake's mansion. It was nothing exaggerated, being a simple two-story villa with a large garden and a small pond in the center of it, surrounded by stone walls with a single large wooden door as the only method of entry. Waiting for them there were Jiraiya together with other shinobi arranged on the roofs of the surrounding houses and along the road to drive away the curious civilians, and Tsunade could immediately see from her former teammates' look that he didn't approve of her choice. "This one," said Tsunade, motioning toward the mansion. "Everything that belongs to Naruto's parents is in here." Jiraiya walked toward them and, after staring with a perverted smile at Brandish and Merlin's bodies, asked, "So how are you going to remove the security seals? Did Naruto give you a key or something?" "That doesn't concern you," replied Virgil with a scowl, before looking at his side, Brandish. Brandish said nothing, just walked up to the wooden door, and when she was close enough an intricate pattern of seals became visible to all. Those seals were among Minato and Kushina's best creations, as they created a complete sphere around their home, thus preventing anyone from entering from underground or from the sky. They also prevented what was inside the sphere from deteriorating or aging, such as furniture, plants, and food. As such, they had immediately attracted the interest of many shinobi, including Danzo who wanted them for himself, but with Minato's death, the secret of their creation was lost. Brandish placed a hand on those seals and, under the shocked gaze of everyone present, the seals began to get smaller and smaller until they vanished beneath the palm of her hand. In a matter of seconds, one of Minato Namake's most intricate and powerful works was destroyed with a single touch, but Brandish didn't seem to give any weight to her actions and, with a simple push, opened the door. "There. It's open now." Tsunade gaped at her, her mind completely blown away by what she just saw, but just when she was about to ask how she did it, a scream ripped through the air attracting the attention of everyone present, and it only took a moment to see an Anbu who had just driven a kunai into the base of the neck of a bronze soldier. That was the signal that gave the green light to total chaos, and in a matter of seconds, several shinobi from Konoha rushed at the soldiers of the Empire, managing to catch some of them off guard. "What the hell are you doing?" shouted Tsunade with all her strength, her eyes full of rage aimed at her own shinobi who were attacking against her orders. "Stop this at once. All of you." However, none of the various ninja listened to her and continued to fight against the forces of the Empire, who had organized quickly to repel the attackers. Gritting her teeth in anger, Tsunade ordered her Anbu and the remaining shinobi, who still seemed to be listening to her, to stop all those who didn't obey her orders, before moving to do her own bidding. Meanwhile, some shinobi leapt over the wall of the mansion, but attracted Merlin's attention, "Captain." Yes, I saw them. "I'll leave the rest to you," said Meliodas before rushing inside the Namake's house. "Die, demon lover," shouted an Anbu jumping at her with his tanto ready to strike, only to be pierced by several small kunai-like spears and turned into minced meat. Looking to her right, Merlin saw King fly towards her with a bored look. "We can defend ourselves freely, right?" "But of course," smiled Merlin, moving her right hand to fire several beams of energy that hit enemy shinobi, incinerating each one of them. "They attacked us first, after all." King nodded before taking to the air and using his sacred treasure, striking several enemies at once, either killing them immediately or wounding them enough to take them out while letting the others kill them. A few shinobi tried to strike him using several jutsu, but all the small spears that made up his weapon quickly moved to protect him before raining down on those who had attacked him, reducing them to mere red spots on the roofs of the houses. Merlin took to the air as well and began firing more energy beams, oblivious to how those still alive were terrified or horrified by her attacks, which reduced victims to ashes in moments. Honestly, they were supposed to be shinobi, yet it took so little to shock them. Merlin was now certain that people like Itachi Hayabusa, formerly Uchiha, were gems hidden in the middle of a pile of rocks. A strong tremor attracted the attention of many of those present as two Anbu, belonging to the Akimichi clan, grew enormous so that they could quickly crush their opponents, as the famine of recent years had severely depleted their food reserves. the source of their strength. Imagine their surprise when, before them, Diane instantly grew until she was a little less tall than them, holding her massive warhammer like a twig. The two Akimichi didn't hesitate to try to punch her, but Diane blocked both shots with the shaft of her weapon before pushing them back, destroying part of the road. Before they could recover, she hit both of them with her weapon, managing to send them flying, and, thankfully, they returned to their normal size before crashing into two houses, blowing holes in the ceilings. Slamming her weapon on the ground, she looked at the damaged road. Even though Naruto told me about them, I didn't think these ninjas could get bigger than me. She then slapped away a couple of ninja who had tried to stab their weapons in her leg, sending them on the ground, breaking several of their bones. Right near where they had crashed, Ban was moving with ease among several enemies, using his 4-section staff to strike them in vital points or using his magic to rip the hearts out of their chests, then dropping them to the ground. Just after smashing a Chunin's skull, he turned in time to have an Anbu pierce his heart with a sword, but instead of screaming in pain, he spat out some blood and looked at his enemy with a grin that hurts, you know that? The Anbu stepped back, surprised by the albino's reaction, but Ban grabbed him by the throat, easily lifting him off the ground. What are you? Oh, that's easy, I'm immortal. Snap. Throwing aside the corpse of the man whose neck he had just broken, Ban turned towards the mansion and saw that 3 ninjas had managed to get through the wall of knights and bronze soldiers, heading towards Brandish, who still hadn't moved since she opened the door. The woman saw them coming and, without flinching, threw 3 pebbles at them. The 3 ninja grinned, convinced that she was not a fighter, but in the blink of an eye the 3 pebbles became boulders and none of them had the opportunity to avoid them, thus being smashed and killed. Sighing, Brandish went back to watching the rest of the fights. Why am I here? Virgil could have just cut those seals with his katana. Speaking of Virgil, the son of Sparta was spreading death like no other. No one could see him for more than a second before he disappeared, reducing the closest enemy to a pile of chunks of flesh. After decapitating 3 Anbu with a single slash, he moved beside Tsunade, staring at her with a disapproving look. Has this place sunk so low that you'd even try to kill ambassadors from the Empire? Wait, Virgil. I swear this was not my idea, said Tsunade. After knocking out 2 Jonin, I would never do such a thing. MH. Therefore your subordinates act against you and do not listen to you. Virgil shook his head before moving away, killing another shinobi. We will have words about this. Tsunade could only curse yet again whoever set this up, and she also had half an idea who was responsible. Inside the mansion, the infiltrated Anbu group was assiduously searching for any scroll or weapon that might come in handy. Search from top to bottom. Danza-sama wants it all recovered and handed over to him. Oh, so that's the name of your boss. All the ninjas turned towards the entrance, where Meliodas was looking at them with a smirk on his face. Naruto told me that creepy guy was going to try something. I guess I have to offer him a free meal at my tavern when I get home. You won't do anything because you'll die here. Kill him, shouted one of the Anbu before hurling a ball of fire at him, mimicked by his comrades, but when the flaming bullets were close to hitting Meliodas, he drew his sword with disarming speed. Counter vanish. With a single slash, he completely cancelled the incoming attacks, shocking his opponents. You know that this is Naruto's house, right? I don't want anything to happen in here, said Meliodas with a serious look on his face. The Anbu drew their swords, ready to face him hand to hand, but he shook his head and within seconds an unnatural and terrifying pressure began to crush them as the boy's eyes became 2 pools of darkness. A strange mark began to form on his forehead, and some of the Anbu immediately thought of Orochimaru's cursed seal, as his lips curled up in a cruel grin. You've always thought of Naruto as a demon, haven't you? He took a step forward and the Anbu backed away from him. In that case, let me show what a real demon can do. When even the last shinobi was finally stopped, Tsunade looked around and could only feel shame. At least 50 of her ninja had died in that futile battle, with another 30 immobilized by her, Jiraiya, and the few ninja who still obeyed her without question. On the other hand, 8 bronze soldiers, a knight, and 2 shinobi of the Empire had perished, and all of them had died in the first minutes of the fight, then had organized themselves and had begun to push back their assailants, mostly thanks to Virgil and the others, who had killed most of their enemies. Heads are going to roll for this, thought Tsunade with an angry scowl. She already had a clear idea of who was behind it, and while she hated having anyone behind her back, sending so many ninjas to their deaths was way over the line. Seeing Virgil walk towards her, with a terrifyingly cold gaze, she prepared to contain the damage to the best of her ability. On behalf of all of Konoha, I am truly sorry for what happened. It wasn't my intention at all for it to end like this, but I already know who the culprits might be. If you would just give me a few hours for dash. Virgil raised a hand to stop her. Spare it. It is now clear that this village is a dying beast, with multiple heads intent on biting each other rather than trying to survive. I want to talk to the rulers of this place right now, all of them. Normally Tsunade would have been angry since she was the leader of the village, but by now she knew that no one thought so, and even the emissaries of the Empire had noticed this detail. Sighing, she nodded and summoned a shinobi to her, ordering him to convene the council with absolute urgency. When the Chunin left to carry out the orders, Virgil had already gone to his companions, while their dead comrades were placed in special storage scrolls, and some of the Empire's shinobi started entering the Namikaze residence to reclaim Naruto's inheritance. This isn't going to end well. Sometimes Tsunade hated being right. Immediately after sending one of her shinobi to summon the council members, she herself had headed for the Hokage Tower together with Jiraiya and his AMVU, and Virgil and Merlin had also come with them, stating that the others would stand guard against more backstabbing actions from Konoha. Again, Tsunade couldn't argue against his words. While what had taken place would undoubtedly cast further mud on the village's reputation, Tsunade was feeling further anger and shame since she had convened the council 20 minutes ago and, while the clan heads had arrived practically immediately, the members of the civilian side had arrived calmly and without seeming sorry about it, all the while the 3 fossils posing as her advisors had not yet arrived. Finally, the chamber's door was opened and the 3 latecomers entered, trying to appear as if they were gods on earth, but it was clear that, judging by Virgil's annoyed look and Merlin's amused smile, they were only making themselves ridiculous. Sitting down in their seats, and getting a glare from Tsunade in the process, the 3 old shinobi closely watched their 2 guests, and Tsunade could swear she saw new wrinkles appearing on their decrepit faces when neither Virgil nor Merlin showed any form of respect towards them. "What did you want to discuss, Tsunade? Why so much urgency?" asked Hamura in a voice that exuded lies with every word. Virgil didn't even give Tsunade time to open her mouth. "Your shinobi have attacked us and killed members of the Empire's delegation. We want immediate compensation for the damage and the affront suffered. We demand a chest full of gold per emissary killed by your shinobi." The civilian side of the council immediately erupted with howls of protest, but a simple glance from Virgil was enough to silence them immediately. Koharu looked at the 2 emissaries with disapproving eyes. "Those were scum, traitorous ninja from the village. We did not organize that attack and therefore we cannot be held responsible for what happened." "Stop talking nonsense. So many traitors in the village, and no one noticed?" asked Virgil, looking at them as if they were stupid. "You'd better pay before things get any worse for you." "We won't pay a dime for a demon lover," shouted a merchant from the civilian side. "I bet you were the one who instigated the attack. You killed some village shinobi, you should pay us." Merlin. "On it." With a snap of her fingers, all members of the civilian side vanished into thin air, shocking everyone else in the room. "What happened to them?" asked Jiraiya, unable to help but connect what happened to a space-time seal, the ones used by Minato when he was alive. "Oh, I just teleported them to the middle of the lake not too far from here," said Merlin with the smile still on her face. "A good swim should clear their heads, and now it's much quieter here." Making a mental note to ask Merlin if she could teach her that trick, Tsunade sighed before looking at Virgil. "I understand that the damage suffered is huge, but 11 gold chests would risk bankrupting us." "That's not my problem. Whoever organized all this had to think about the consequences first, said Virgil, casting a glare at Danzo, who scowled back at him. The swordsman then looked back at the Hokage. However, if you are not going to compensate us, you simply need to be motivated. He then nodded at Merlin. Do it. She nodded back before closing her eyes for a moment. Done. What? Hamura looked at her with confused eyes. What are you talking about? What have you done? Merlin merely smiled at him. I simply told a dear friend to motivate you properly. Then, all of a sudden, the temperature in the room went up. A few minutes before, Sasuke couldn't believe what was happening to him. Him, an elite of the Uchiha clan, reduced to a mere prisoner and bargaining chip. Him. Not only had he been humiliated by that damned bitch, but Naruto and his useless minions had also had the gall to imprison him. He would make them pay, from the first man to the last. He'd kill Naruto, take the empire for himself, and then let those bitches know who the real elite was. Looking up, he glared at one of his captors, a ridiculously pink-haired boy or maybe girl, with yellow eyes. When he woke up, Sasuke was immediately aware of the heavy handcuffs around his ankles and wrists, as well as the leather strap around his mouth that prevented him from speaking. The Uchiha immediately tried to free himself, but those handcuffs had sealed his chakra, and he couldn't do anything about it. At one point, a team of 4 Andes had found him, but that pink-haired guy had immediately put them all to sleep with some strange energy arrows, and the 4 idiots were still there on the ground. Besides him, there was also a wiry orange-haired man with a ridiculous mustache, and he too had an arrow stuck in the base of his neck. Yet he wasn't dead, but simply asleep. The idea of being monitored by people like that was driving him mad, more than it should have. Especially since the rain hadn't stopped for a second, yet those two seemed immune to it. Not even a drop fell around them. An elite like him didn't deserve to be left to rot like a stray dog. Then, at one point, the guy with the pink hair raised his head, and after nodding, he snapped his fingers, dispersing the arrow at the base of his partner's neck. That was the moment Sasuke realized that there was a reason this guy had been put to sleep. Under his shocked eyes, the wiry man began to grow bigger and more muscular, eventually becoming a behemoth easily taller than anyone else in the village. His aura had also changed, and the surrounding rain seemed to almost evaporate due to the heat emanating from his body. Turning to the pink-haired boy, he asked Gauther, "Where are we?" "Near Konoha, a scanner," said Gauther with a calm voice. "Merlin asked me to put you to sleep because she knew you wouldn't accept the idea of staying here while she went to the village with the others. Now she told me to wake you up because she has to ask you for a favor." "Anything for my beloved Merlin," said a scanner with a nod, crossing his arms. "What does she require of me?" Well, she and the others were attacked by some Konoha ninja and died. Despite the surrounding heat, Sasuke felt ice-cold shivers running down his back as a scanner turned to face him. Those mongrels dared to attack Merlin? Yes, View, it's all good now. They couldn't even touch him, but we lost some of the soldiers in the initial ambush, explained Gauther. Not at all bothered by the heat, they are now agreeing compensation, but it seems that the upper echelons of the village are against our request, and therefore Merlin wants you to press them to pay. Escanor continued to glare at Sasuke for a few seconds, almost reducing him to ashes with just his gaze, before turning to his companion. "If she were to ask me, I could easily burn the village to ashes." Gauther simply pointed at the mountain with the faces of the 5 Hokage carved on its facade. Apparently she thinks that monument is in bad taste. Escanor looked up at the mountain and nodded, before holding up a single finger, creating a miniature sun that seemed to burn the grass below, and Sasuke couldn't help but be shocked by the intensity of those flames. He had never felt anything like it. With a mighty leap, Escanor leapt into the sky before hurling that little sun against the mountain, and when it impacted against the rock, he closed his hand for an instant, pride flare. In a dazzling flash, the entire mountain was engulfed in titanic flames that melted the rock like butter, and within seconds, all that was left of the Konoha monument was a smoking crater of molten rock. Landing gracefully, but cracking the ground beneath his feet, Escanor nodded in satisfaction. This should satisfy Merlin. Meanwhile, he turned to Sasuke, glaring at him. I sincerely hope your village doesn't try to attack her again, or it won't end well for you. What have you done? Screamed Koharu with shocked eyes, looking at the crater near the Hokage Tower. She, as well as many others, were visibly sweating from the heat, and while it was better than the cold brought by the rain, the destruction of their monument was something horrific. Motivating you, said Virgil without missing a beat, either you pay us, or the rest of the village will suffer the same fate. This will be seen as a declaration of war, shouted Hamura. With some of the clan heads still shocked by the destruction of the mountain, no one will remain on the sidelines in front of such an act. Spare me your empty cries. No one will side with Konoha. Meanwhile, Danzo was watching Virgil intently. The destruction of the Konoha monument was a great loss, but not an irreparable one, and from what he had been told, the white-haired swordsman in front of him had been the one who had eliminated the most shinobi without even breaking a sweat or taking a single blow. It was undeniable that he was a warrior far superior to many others. If he could control him, Danzo could easily conquer the other hidden villages before focusing on the empire. Discreetly, he molded some chakra in his blindfolded eye and activated the Sharingan hidden behind the blindfolds, preparing to control that monster and use it against all of his enemies. Unfortunately for him, however, Virgil was anything but controllable by a technique as weak as his and, feeling a slight annoyance in his mind, Virgil immediately drove it away, shocking Danzo. Having easily pinpointed the source of that annoyance, Virgil glared at Danzo and with the thumb of his left hand, eased the blade of his katana slightly out of its scabbard before immediately sheathing it again. The table, as well as Danzo's walking stick, were immediately cut down to pieces, shocking everyone present. I see Konoha is not afraid to crawl lower and lower for its own gain. Tsunade glared at Danzo, since she was not blind. What have you done? The man didn't answer her, merely scowling at Virgil, silently cursing him since the backlash received was causing him to feel excruciating pain in his eye hidden under the bandages. It shouldn't have ended like this. Now he was also in danger of losing his secret weapon. You have 1 hour to gather the required gold, after which this village will cease to exist and your precious Uchiha will be the first to die, hissed Virgil before disappearing with Merlin, leaving Tsunade with more problems than before. With a deep sigh, Tsunade sent a shinobi to retrieve the members of the civilian side of the council. If they had to pay, she'd make sure those idiots put most of their savings into it, and she would also take a good part of the Uchiha's money, since the main fault lay with that spoiled brat. Tsunade. Jiraiya walked toward her. If we really pay what is required. I know, Jiraiya. Sighed Tsunade, pinching the bridge of her nose. Konoha is doomed. Is this report accurate? Asked a chilling voice in the darkness, as 2 yellow eyes read a scroll. Yes, we had the information verified from 3 different sources, Orochimaru-sama. Sitting on his throne, the traitorous Sannin flashed a grin that would have made many battle-hardened shinobi tremble in fear. My, it seems that Naruto-kun has been busy in recent years, founding an empire, getting married, having children. I almost regret not sending him a wedding present. I absolutely have to remedy this shortcoming of mine. Kneeling in front of him, Kabuto flashed a knowing smile. What kind of gift do you have in mind, Orochimaru-sama? I have yet to decide, but forward this report to the Raikage and Tsuchikage in the meantime, said the snake Sannin with the grin still on his face. Kabuto nodded before standing up and walking out of the room to do his master's bidding. Meanwhile, an eerie laughter echoed in the air. Now Naruto-kun, I wonder how strong you've gotten. Sasuke Uchiha was still his primary target as a new body, but perhaps some specimen of the empire could definitely be his thing. Starting with the Emperor's children.